Let's discuss hearing and sound, elements of hearing. Again, in regular psych, we are not going to focus on how the ear works and the eardrums, and we're not going into all that. In AP, we will cover it. So if you're wanting to know more information about that, it's interesting stuff. It's just we don't do it in regular. But Module 5 has an entire section on how the ear works and so forth. But in terms of hearing and sounds, okay, first of all, for sound to take place, there has to be a source of sound. And then there has to be some medium on which the sound travels. And then there has to be a receptor. So the medium that we tend to use is airwaves. My voice going through airwaves, and you hear it in the classroom. Now, here we're using electronic equipment as the technique of sending the noise. And I don't want to go through how the computer does it. But anyway, that would be an example. Years ago, you would see, for example, American Indians. They would put, like old movies, American Indians would put their ear down to the ground. And what they were doing is they were listening. They were using the ground as a medium to see if they could hear, like horses or things like that were moving in other areas. So, anything can be used as a medium. But that does bring us back to the age-old question. If a husband says something and a wife does not hear it, is he still wrong? And that's something that, people have been pondering for decades. So, well, let's go ahead and talk about some elements of hearing and sound. Frequency. When we talk about the frequency of a sound wave, what we mean is the vibrations per second. How many vibrations per second? And we refer to that as the pitch of the sound. So you people who are in music, this is old news to you. You have studied this all the time, but to be on the correct pitch. But basically what that means is it's looking at the frequency. How many vibrations per second? In class, we're actually going to do the little online test, and we're going to see how well each of us are able to hear. Human beings tend to have a range. Now this, according to this chart, it shows from about 50 hertz up to about 20,000 hertz. Some humans can actually hear sounds with as low pitch as about 20 hertz. But 20,000 is about the typical max for humans in terms of how on the high end, okay, the very high-pitched sounds. Dogs, you see, can go much higher than humans. And I know, for example, when I was a kid, we had a dog whistle. And we would go around the neighborhood just causing trouble because we'd be blowing the dog whistle. No humans could hear it because the sound that came out of the dog whistle was way up in here, very high-pitched sound. No humans heard it, but all the dogs in the neighborhood would start chirping and barking like crazy, and then people would come out and yell at their dogs and all that, but they didn't know we were actually initiating that. Mice can hear extremely high-pitched sounds. Years and years ago, my mom, in the house that I grew up in, we would occasionally have mice. And she would tend to have mouse traps set out and so forth. Well, one time on TV, she saw something advertised, and it's something that you just plug into the wall, and it emits a very high-pitched sound like such. And supposedly, the television commercial claimed that it would drive away mice, that you wouldn't have any problems with mice if you just simply bought this thing, plugged it in. You'd never have to worry about them again. And my mom believed it, and she bought it. And I told her, I said, "You're crazy. You've just blown however much money it was." I said, "There is no way that's going to work." It did. We never, ever had another mouse. Ever. And so it was incredible. Um, so and when my mom passed away years ago, I actually saw that was in her house, still plugged in, and I grabbed it and I brought it over to my house and plugged it in. And now I'm not saying that's the reason, but we've never had a mouse. So anyhow, those very high pitched sounds can get people. We're going to take an online test in class, like I say, and see what is your limits, okay? Because as people get older, their range of being able to hear high pitched and even low pitched sounds diminishes. So a lot of times when people say, that a person's deaf or whatever, usually it's just hard of hearing, and they lose that range naturally. Now, the Doppler effect, that is one other concept that we talk about in psych. And Doppler effect is the concept that basically says sounds that are coming toward you will have a higher pitch than those sounds that are traveling away from you. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Because as a sound is getting closer to you, it keeps emitting more and more sound waves. There's more and more sound waves hitting your ears. So those sound waves, the more sound waves you have per second, the higher the pitch. But as something's traveling away from you, the sound waves are getting further and further apart. We refer to that as the Doppler effect. Okay, that's that concept. Now, if you think, and I'm going to do this, it's kind of embarrassing, but I'm going to do it. If you think about a race car, if you go to the speedway and you listen to the race car, it comes by and all of a sudden you hear this, and that's the Doppler effect. The higher pitched sound as it comes toward you, and then as it goes past you and away, it goes into a much lower pitched sound. All right. Another factor about hearing is the loudness of a noise or of a sound. And loudness is basically referred to or measured by the height of a sound wave. And we call that how many decibels the sound has. So what that really looks at is the energy or the pressure of the sound wave. So when we talk about how many decibels something is, a typical conversation is about 60 decibels. You can see some other things here. Whisper, gas mower, jet plane. Now the jet plane is a low flying jet plane that goes by about 100 feet over your head, has about 135 decibels. Now, here's the key. And this, if we got into how the ear works and what damage can be done, this comes into play because very loud noises can be damaging to your ears. You know that. Your mom and dad have told you that forever. But a dangerous sound is anything that's 85 decibels or higher. So if you think about it, a gas mower, most people's gas mowers, that's above the level that can actually damage your hearing. So if you are in a prolonged time period, okay, if you're around something that is higher than 85 decibels for a long time period, and by long time period I mean 15 minutes or longer, that can actually damage your hearing. So here is kind of a chart that gives you some other things. Fireworks, a gunshot, a jackhammer, a rock concert, typically around 115 decibels. And obviously those rock concerts last more than 15 minutes. So, if you have that kind of stuff at a consistent time, you're going to end up with some hearing loss. Listening to music on earphones, even doing that at a standard volume level of 5 generates about 100 decibels of noise. So that is an issue. All right, we will stop at that point.